I think art is a good place to practice getting over our fears because if you can apply these ideas about getting over your fears to your art, you can apply it to other things, which is really cool. And what makes art amazing is that it can be an amazing place to get to know yourself, build a relationship with yourself, and then go into the world feeling like a stronger person because you take time to be with yourself. This one question has completely changed my life. What are you scared of? So often the things that are holding us back from making art or making new friends or moving somewhere that we might enjoy living, whatever it is that you're scared of doing or that you aren't doing, is just often rooted in fear that we're unwilling to acknowledge or pain from the past that we're unwilling to acknowledge. And I recently read in a book, Our Lives Are Either Built on Fear or Faith, and our lives are a story of the fears that we have. And wow, that really messed me up because I kind of felt like I had no excuses after that. Like, do I want a life built on fear or built on faith and risk taking? And when I say faith, I just mean like believing that things can go well and not just that everything's going to be the worst possible outcome. Sometimes things are the best possible outcome. So, in order to ask what would happen if you weren't afraid, there's a really important question. What are you afraid of? And I like to start with that if I'm like going to a canvas and I feel nervousness for some reason, then I have to be real with myself. What am I afraid of? I'm afraid of wasting art supplies. I'm afraid of wasting my time. I'm afraid I'm not as good as I thought I was. Like, I acknowledge what the fears were, and then I have to address them and be like, okay, well, the only way to make art is to use art supplies. So, what happens if you misuse art supplies? You'll buy more. Okay, and you might be disappointed that you misused them. Also, okay. Like, so many people, the biggest thing that they're afraid of is disappointment in any capacity. I think that's what prevents so many people from taking small risks, ones that aren't life threatening. It's not life or death, but there's like a fear of, what if I'm disappointed and it doesn't work out? What if I spend time making art and it doesn't look good? Then what? Then I'm disappointed. Then what? I don't want to be disappointed. So much of what people struggle with is fear of being disappointed, which to me, I'm like, are you not going to take any creative risks because you can't handle the emotion of disappointment? And it's something I've heard a lot as an artist when people are like, well, don't pursue art because if it doesn't work, you'll be disappointed. And I'm like, that's a really dumb reason not to do something that you love. The worst case scenario is being where I already am, but being disappointed that it happens further down the line. What's the best case scenario of not going after what I want? And I think so many people just aren't honest with themselves. They're not real with themselves. I think it's part of what makes making art so hard is it involves a level of honesty and vulnerability with yourself. Like, you have to actually know yourself to make art. You have to show up. You can't show up and lie to yourself when you're making art. It's a place of realness making art. So, learning to actually face our challenging emotions is a big part of what allows us to show up and create. Because so many people are like, I don't want to show up because someone might judge me. Okay, what does the idea of someone judging you make you feel? A lot of it comes down to fearing our own emotional reactions to the things we're afraid of, because okay, what happens if someone judges me? Then I'll feel embarrassed or ashamed or whatever. Like, come up with whatever emotion you might feel to the things that you're afraid of. I think a lot of people are afraid of being embarrassed. They're afraid of disappointing themselves or someone else, and they don't really think it forward. I'm like, okay, but what's the worst case scenario of not trying? Let's talk about that. If you don't try, your worst case scenario is likely you're gonna be wherever you are right now. Like, if you don't try to do the next thing, you'll just be where you are, but after having tried, it's like not the biggest deal. However, we are taught throughout our lives in many different ways to be afraid of our emotions, of our feelings, of being real with ourselves, of discomfort. I think we're so often taught to be afraid of discomfort. And there's a child psychologist I listen to who I'm obsessed with. Her name is Becky Kennedy. And she says parents shouldn't teach their kids just how to succeed, but also how to fail. Because she says, like, everyone wants their child to succeed, like, every healthy parent wants their child to succeed and do well, but like, no one wants their kid to fail. And then so often we're like, oh, don't do the thing so you might not fail. Like, don't try because I don't want to see you have a challenging emotion. I can't cope with it. I don't think you can. And I think she's so spot on with this that so many people are like, don't try the thing because you might be disappointed because it might not work out. Which to me, that just never made sense. Because to me, I'm like, the worst case scenario of not making art is now I've wasted my life doom scrolling, consuming other people creating, and feeling like there's something missing in myself. The worst case scenario of not making art is great. I still have all of the art supplies, but no one ever went to an art museum and said, wow, what an amazing unopened paint tube that is on the wall. We don't go to Michael's or Blick being like, wow, unopened paint tubes. As artists, you go to an art supply store and think, oh, how cool, I could make something with that. But non artists don't go there. They don't want to see potential, they want to see what you actually do. And that's your job if you're a creative person. And I don't even just mean financially, it's your job. I mean, it's your mission, it's what you're supposed to do. And just remember, like, you're not going to go to a museum and see unopened art supplies. You're not going to see a blank canvas. You might at some museums, and that always bums me out. I'm like, okay, wow, it represents potential or whatever. It's not my taste in art. But the point is, most of the time when you go to a museum, you say, wow, that person painted that, did that. There's an action involved. So getting yourself into action is really important. And I think sometimes there's this idea that you have to not be scared of the entire process in order to begin. You don't. What would it take to make a painting right now? Right now, I have a tube of paint. Could squeeze some paint. Could put it on a canvas. Could just make one line. Could just paint a background. Could just get myself water. Like, if you're scared of the whole big thing or if it's overwhelming, just start at the beginning. And when you talk to most artists, I don't think they want to talk about the meaning, they want to talk about the process. Because the process of being an artist, that's the magic. You showed up and then you kept showing up and something came out of that. And that's amazing. So if you're afraid of anything in your life, identify it. What am I afraid of? Okay. And why am I afraid of that? What am I afraid of? Why am I afraid of that? And what's the worst that will happen if that happens? Someone who I love listening to, Tim Ferriss, author of The 4 Hour Work Week, talks about that in his book, the concept of fear setting, not just goal setting. Like, okay, I want to take a risk. Literally, what are the worst case scenarios? Not enough people, I think, just do risk assessment of what's the worst that can happen and what will I do if the worst happens? Because so many people, they're like, but this thing could happen. I'm like, okay, let's keep going. And what if? And sometimes you do that risk assessment and you will recognize that something isn't worth the risk, something dangerous. Like, what's the worst that can happen if I cross the street with my eyes closed? You know what? It's good I thought that through. I'm gonna not do that. And I think that a lot of people are afraid of the wrong things. We're afraid of discomfort because we think it's danger. And my life has fundamentally changed when I realized that I was reacting to discomfort and danger at the same level. I realized that for me through exercise, interestingly enough. I felt very comfortable in my art, I think, in this process, but with exercise, it felt like, oh my gosh, my body hurts from exercising so much. And taking a moment to be like, is this dangerous? Or am I just uncomfortable? Like, can I do this even if it doesn't feel as good as sitting and doing nothing? And it's not even like intense exercise that could hurt me. There was a day I was going on a crazy long hike And I just had this realization of this is uncomfortable, but it's not dangerous, so I can do it. And that is where resiliency is born, is when you can differentiate, when you can tell the difference between discomfort and danger. Is this gonna hurt me? Like, is this gonna end me? Or is this gonna be a tough emotion for me to sit with? It's tough when you make a piece of art and share it online and people don't care about it or don't like it. Can I live with that? Yes. Yes, I can live with that because the alternative is I never share my art and it doesn't reach people who will enjoy it. And I think learning to be like, can I live with this? And can I live with the alternative? Okay, I'm afraid. I'm giving a fake example. I'm afraid of sharing my art online. Okay, what are you afraid of though? That's the opposite. What's bad about not sharing your art online? And I talked about this in another video I had about being cringe and that, and people's fear of being cringe. And it goes back to that same idea of like, okay, you're afraid of being cringe, of someone judging you, but the alternative is that you don't try and you disappoint yourself and you might feel kind of jealous of the people that try and become a resentful person and then discourage other people from trying because you need people in your not trying tribe. So you're not going to get to 90 with your unopened art supplies and someone's going to be like, wow, good for you. You saved all your art supplies and never made anything. At least you never made bad art and at least you were never cringe. Like, that's not going to happen. You don't get any type of reward for reaching elderly age without having tried anything. And you can have a job and paint in your free time. You can be a student and take a sketchbook with you. Like, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It's not massive paintings or misery. You can just make small art if you want. There's an artist who I love because I feel like when I reference him, it takes away all excuses of not making art. His name is Andy Goldsworthy. He makes art with nature. Like, he'll arrange leaves in a really cool way and film a time lapse of it, and then it just like goes away back into the forest. Or he stacks rocks in a unique way. He's a really incredible artist because so many artists will come up with excuse after excuse as to why they're not making the art. One is money, one is time, one is energy. And I think if you're really low energy and like need to become a healthier person, then that's your artist block, is your health. It's not like something in your head, it's something you need to work on physically. If your artist block is fear, then you need to process those fears. Fears are like paperwork. You have to like go through them or it just stacks up and takes up your entire art table. So if fear's getting in your way, you gotta think about it. You gotta allow yourself to acknowledge your fears. And everyone has fear. Everyone has fear. You'd be crazy not to have fear. You were evolved from the people who had fear. That's why you're here. If you're afraid, you're human. And if you can get over those fears and allow yourself to create even with some fears and worries, then you're an artist. And that's all for today. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, tell me about your relationship to fear. I want to hear it. And buy my art on dahliaroz.com.